Spirit, one God, Amen. So today with the final promise from God, and it's the second promise that we find in the promise, the word, do not be afraid. خدنا قبل كده كان في وعد لا تخف لأني فديتك دعوتك باسمك أنت لي. النهارده بناخد خوف تاني، وده كان أيام الحرب. إنه ربنا بيقول God is saying do not be afraid, just wait and see what God will be doing. And so let us learn from Abuna Michael Sorial and thank him for driving all the way from the south to bless us today. Thank you, Abuna.
Name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, one God, Amen. أنا هتأسف لكم عشان العربي بتاعي على قدي فهتتعبوا شوية. I'm going to speak in English tonight, as every night. Hopefully you can follow along. We're going to be reading tonight from Exodus 14, خروج, right? 14. خروج, right? You look confused. Okay, perfect. Okay, Exodus 14, we'll stick to English. Name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, one God, Amen. When things seem like they're out of control, people tend to panic. People tend to lose it a little bit because no one likes to be in a state of no control. I remember when I was in middle school, very, very vividly, I remember this memory, that a group of boys came to our house. We lived in East LA. Now, if you're not familiar, like I know you think Belleville, Jersey City is a rough neighborhood, but East LA was a really, really rough neighborhood. It was real tough. And so this group of boys came to the door. They were from the Tres Locos gang. And they knocked on the front door and they said to my mother, hello, Miss Sorial. They asked for my brother by name. And she said, what do you want from him? And she said, we want you to send him out so we can beat him up. They didn't say it that nicely, but that's the main idea, okay? And so she slammed the door and she said, Yusuf, my dad, call the police. Yusuf, we're moving. When we feel like everything is closing in around us, we sometimes, understandably, fall into a state of panic, a state of fear. And in today's reading in Exodus chapter 14, the children of Israel had everything moving in on all sides, moving in on them. And we can understand how they would be afraid, how they would be terrified, okay? In Exodus 14, verse 10, it describes for us that as Pharaoh drew near, the children of Israel, they lifted up their eyes and they saw the Egyptians marching for them. So they were afraid and they cried out to the Lord. On one side, they were trapped. They had the Red Sea over here. And on this side, they had a big army coming at them. And so what did they do? They had nowhere to go. And their immediate reaction was to cry out to the Lord at the end of verse 10. Before they could rest in God, though, panic set in. Sometimes our initial reaction is we cry out, Lord, have mercy, God, help me. But then before our hearts can rest, what happens a lot of times? We begin to panic. We become our own worst enemy. There seemed to be certain destruction for them. So then they immediately turn to Moses. Psychologists have identified when there's fear that comes, there's usually 4 responses that they talk about. Fight, flight, freeze, and fawn is the most recent one. They'll add more, I'm sure, in the future. I want you to imagine with me the parents in the house. If you have kids at home, I've been home this last few days, just me and my 3 kids. It's been wonderful. But we've had moments when there's craziness in the house. The first reaction sometimes is to fight, right? There's conflict, and then everyone starts yelling at everyone. The second one, they don't always come in this order. People have different reactions. The second one is flight. And I know many mothers and some fathers as well, that they have begun to go, and the favorite place to go in the house is to hide in the bathroom. Where the door is locked, yep, some of the moms are like, yes, guilty. We're guilty. We go and hide sometimes from the kids. The third one is freeze. Freeze. And if there's conflict, the kid might be repeating over and over again, do you hear me? Do you hear me? And the parent may be unable to gather their thoughts, and so they freeze. The fourth reaction rather, is to fawn. To fawn, I imagine a parent, there's conflict, and the kid is begging and yelling and screaming. The dad or the mom finally says, yes, dear, you can have a bowl of Cinnamon Toast Crunch for dinner. No problem. That's a delicious dinner. Enjoy yourself. The children of Israel, they knew they could not win. They knew they couldn't win. They were, in their mind, they said, we're destined to destruction. So they knew they couldn't fight. They had nowhere to flee or to run to. It was too late to try to bribe or fawn Pharaoh with anything because he was infuriated. He had just lost his own firstborn, and his entire nation had lost all of their firstborn as well. So what did they do? They froze. They froze. But they added one more thing. With their freezing, and this is something that we do as well sometimes, when we're afraid, we begin to fuss or complain. We complain when things are closing in. Why me? How come? Why did it have to be like this? I remember, without mentioning too many details, my parents, when they came over here from Egypt back in 1970, they had this real struggle, like things are not going as well as we expected. And there was arguments and there was discussions about what they should do, right? There was complaining, like we had a great job back in Egypt, and why did we come here, and whose fault was it? The children of Israel, they turned to Moses, and they said to him, because there were no graves in Egypt, have you taken us away to die in the wilderness? Why have you dealt with us in such a way to bring us up out of Egypt? Is this not the word that we told you in Egypt, saying, let us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians? They're complaining. They're saying, we would have rather just been slaves. You should have left us there. You brought us out here to die. So dramatic. For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than that we should die in the wilderness. Like the Israelites, we find ourselves a lot of times in situations where we feel trapped. And the pressure is there to take matters into our own hands. We become overwhelmed. We begin to panic. And our natural instinct is that we want to take control and try to fix everything the way that we know how to do. We may say that we trust God, but we don't always show it. We fear, what if God doesn't act? What if God doesn't work quickly enough? And so we take things into our own hands. We would rather be in control than have someone else in control. And you find this all around us. People in families, in governments, in communities, they try to control one another in order to have some sense of control in life. And then when we realize we can't control others, and life continues to be out of control, and we can hardly even control ourselves sometimes, we begin to fall back into a state of fear. In our spiritual lives, there's this constant struggle between responding in fear and responding with faith. And that's what we're going to be looking at tonight. Acting out of fear usually pushes us to make decisions very quickly or hastily. I remember maybe 6-7 years ago, worst financial decision that my wife and I made. and I'm sharing this with you as not just as a confession, but hopefully to save you as well from that same type of terrible decision. No, it wasn't having kids. They're wonderful. It wasn't staying in New Jersey. Yes, the taxes are high. It was buying a timeshare. You've been on a vacation. Some of you are like, oh yeah, me too. We were on a vacation. We got suckered into going on this meeting where there was going to be free food, and we went in and they gave us the deal of a lifetime, all the dreams, and then they began to play on our fears. But if you don't plan these kinds of vacations, your family will slip away from you, right? And we acted impulsively out of fear. By the grace of God, we just got out of it. Finally, we got out of it. But after what? After we responded with fear. Sometimes fear also leads people to cling onto what feels safe and familiar. I want you to think about why people act the way that they do. I think about the elementary school boy or the high school girl. The elementary school boy who knows it's wrong to use profanity, and the high school girl who knows it's damaging to smoke marijuana, but they still choose to do so because of fear that they might not be accepted, they might not fit in if they're too different. Fear is really powerful. What about the 32-year-old woman who's in a relationship with a very abusive man? He's pressured her continually to be sexually active, and she is convinced she should end the relationship before they get married. But fear is very powerful and controlling, and she feels like she's lost control. Or think about the father who takes a second job and a third job because he's convinced himself that he has to make just a little bit more money because he has to provide for his kids what the other kids have in school, because that's what a good dad does. And here's this voice in the back of his mind: if you don't do that, what kind of a man are you? Fear is a really powerful master. I remember during the COVID lockdown, man, fear was everywhere. Fear was everywhere. There were things that you couldn't find, like if you needed blood, لو كنتم محتاجين دم, there was nowhere, محدش كان عنده دم في وقت الكوفيد, okay? Truly. Yes, in both ways. I remember Teta one time telling me, she said, بص لازم تروح تجيب توم من المحل عشان من السوبر ماركت عشان لو حد عيا يعني just eat it. كلها كده half. So I was like, okay, Tita said it. So I made the list, tom or garlic and mouthwash, okay? We're making the list. So we made the long list. I went to Walmart, and of course I walked in, the garlic was gone. I guess everyone's Tita told them the same thing, you have to eat garlic. So there was no garlic. There was plenty of mouthwash. People were not planning. But there was also something that nobody could find. Remember? Toilet paper, yes, toilet paper, yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I came home, I told Mora, my wife, she says to me, we were missing some items and my kids are there because it was exciting, Dad went out in the middle of the pandemic and is he going to come back alive? And so anyway, I came back and they were like, where's everything? And they got to the toilet paper and I said, sorry, no toilet paper. Like it was ghost town. And my son says to me, one of my kids, he goes, Baba, at least عندنا شطافة. And he goes, you know what we could do, Baba? And I said, stop right there. We're ending this conversation, okay? So, but when people are afraid, they panic, they hoard, they want to collect, they want to be in some sort of control in their life. Even when we pray, we tell God how to fix things, we tell him the solution, or, this one's my favorite, we tell God, God, give me the strength to do this thing that I've already decided I'm going to do. Strengthen me to do what my will is. So when we panic, we want to be in control. We want to take control of the situation. Fear is a very powerful master. It can be used to move the masses, and it has been used to keep the multitudes enslaved. Fear leads to compromising values and missing out on God's design for life. Fear leads people to isolate rather than seeking support from others and trusting in God's provision. But God says, fear not, stand still. Fear not, stand still. And that's a really tough thing to do when we're afraid, right? It's to be still. It's to stop moving. I remember when the Tres Locos came to our door, the most difficult part of that for my mother was to not pack up all the boxes, rent a U-Haul, and move us that weekend, right? The next 2 months were very difficult for us to not move. But I'll tell you, as soon as we finished our last day of school on a Thursday, the moving truck was there on Friday. We were gone, right? Had a house picked out, we were ready to go. But those 2 months were very difficult to just be still. And I think in our very fast-paced, and especially here in the West, it's so powerful. In our fast-paced, action-focused society, being still is sometimes seen as a source of or a sign of weakness. Right? What are you doing? Why aren't you doing something? You've got to take care of this. You've got to fix this quickly. Sometimes standing still seems contrary to logic, and sometimes it feels impossible for us to do. We don't want to stand still. We don't want to do nothing. We want to take matters into our hands and fix it. I want you to think about 2 scenarios. A man who was given a great job opportunity. Great job opportunity, prestigious job, great salary, fast track, on his way climbing up the corporate ladder. Prestige, everything looks right on paper. But something inside of him, a nudge from God is telling him, just wait. And everyone around him is telling him, you're crazy, just take it. Who does he listen to? Where does he go? What about the couple who has been dying to grow their family, longing for a child? They've tried for years to have children. They've seen countless doctors. They've pursued different treatments. Nothing has worked. And in their pain and desperation, the idea of waiting on God feels really uncomfortable. It feels impossible for them. But God is telling them to wait. And that voice in the back of their mind, in the back of their head, is saying, but you're not getting any younger. You need to move quickly. And of course, Mom and Baba are saying, Yalla ba'a shiddu halkum ha fi. And so, where do they listen? To whom do they listen? When fear is there, and the fear of disappointment, and the fear of coming up short, what should we do? Fear is very powerful. The struggle to be still is very real. It's very difficult. I'm not making light of this. It's tough. It's tough to be still. It's tough to not always try to fix everything every time that there's a problem. It's not easy to quiet our hearts and minds when everything around us seems to scream, act, fix, control. Standing still is very difficult. But that's exactly what the children of Israel are commanded to do. You'll notice that a shift happens in verse 13, if we could scroll down a little bit, when Moses speaks God's word to the people. Fear not, stand still, and see the salvation of the Lord. Fear not, stand still, and see the salvation of the Lord. You see, it's God's wisdom that overturns their human logic, that overturns their fears. It's God's word that gives them rest, that leads from panic to peace. It's not them trying to fix everything on their own. Like, we've tried that, right? We've tried that. And that usually leads us to more and more problems. It's through active faith. Active faith. It's through hearing the word of God. It's through seeking the will of God. It's through stillness before the Lord. It's through stillness looking to the Lord. It's providential that tonight's gospel in Vespers was from Luke chapter 10, where Mary and Martha are hosting our Lord Jesus Christ in the house. And Martha's really upset because she can't sit still. And Mary's sitting at the feet of Christ, and she is receiving the good part. But there's a lot of Marthas who don't know how to be still with the Lord. They know how to be in the presence of God, but not still with the Lord. And what the word of God through Moses commands the children of Israel and commands us is to fear not, stand still, and see the salvation of the Lord. They didn't fight or flee because they couldn't. And you'll notice that Moses didn't just tell them to freeze, he told them to be still or stand still, right? And there's a difference in doing nothing versus stillness. To be still begins by letting go of control. By being still before the Lord means that we allow our hearts and minds to be still with the Lord. It's not just coming and saying words to the Lord. It's stilling all the complexities that are happening on inside of us in order to be present with Him. To seek His face. To pursue Him. We have a choice. We can either cling to our control or we can be still before God. Surrendering means that we acknowledge God's ways are higher than our ways, that His thoughts are greater than ours. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 and 6 tells us that we should trust in the Lord with all our heart, acknowledge Him in all of our ways. To surrender means that we are looking onto the Lord in every part of our life. But that requires that we are still, not just physically. I don't know if you're familiar with the book Way of the Heart by Henry Nouwen. He takes the story of St. Anthony, the great, and he kind of breaks it down. St. Anthony, as you know, like, what do I need to do to be saved? He goes into the church, he hears the gospel, sell that you have, give to the poor, come follow me. He hears that as a word from the Lord. He goes into the wilderness, he sells all that he has, gives to the poor, he goes into the wilderness. And then when he gets out into the wilderness, he prays a second time, Lord, what do we need to do to be saved? And he said, he heard a voice that said, flee, be still, and pray. Flee, be still, and pray. And so Henry Nouwen takes those three movements in the movement of prayer, and he talks about how fleeing is not just getting away from people. Fleeing is getting away from the busyness of our world, of our life, right? And we can't just go into the wilderness. Like, none of us here, well, maybe some of the younger people can, but those of us who are married, who have families, who have households, who have communities or parishes, that, like, we just can't disappear on the community. We can't disappear in our families, right? Where we have a responsibility. And so what does it mean for us to flee? I'm not going to tell you what the book says. I encourage you to read it. It's a wonderful book. But the second part that he talks about is stillness. He actually says the easiest part is the outer stillness. I mean, yes, we have to do some work for ourselves. We have to put away our devices. We need to shut off, like, all the chaos around us. But oftentimes the hardest stillness is not the outer stillness. It's here, right? But that is where active faith comes in. That is the labor of love that's required in our relationship with God and seeing the Lord. I'm catechizing this young woman right now. She said to me, she came from a Pentecostal church, charismatic church, and she said to me, I was raised in this church, and like the energy, the excitement, the beauty of the worship songs I got used to. Like I would walk in and I had this there was this vibe. She goes, but when I come to the Orthodox Church, she goes, there's not that excitement. And she goes, young woman, she goes, I think this is by design. And she said, it requires work for me. It requires work for me to get still. This is just a few days ago, okay? To get still in order that I can really enter into a place of worship. It's work, right? That's why we call it liturgy, right? There is a work of the people. Our work is not just showing up. Our work is an inner labor of love where we're saying, Lord, I'm carrying a lot of fears and complexities around me, and I need to enter into this space. Like those of you who are staying for the praises tonight and the liturgy tonight, I encourage you, labor. Don't just be present. Labor internally to be still with all of the stuff that's going on up here, that's swimming around upstairs in your mind, to really look and see the salvation that the Lord has prepared for you. And it says, which He will accomplish. We need to rest in God and allow the Holy Spirit to guide our actions and to wash over us. And I believe when we do that, fear will fall away. Fear will fade away. Philippians chapter 4 tells us that be anxious for nothing, but by prayer and supplication, let your requests be made known to God. And then he tells us whatever things, and he gives a list of things, pure and lovely and holy and praiseworthy, meditate on these things. In other words, think about, ruminate on these things, and the peace of God will be with you, right? And so, but there's a labor that we have to do. The labor is not just to run away. It's not just to freeze. It's not to fight. It's not to fall on God. There's an inner labor where we are saying, I want to draw unto God. I want to see the work that He's doing in my life. And part of that begins by letting go of control and trusting that God sees the big picture of my life. Trusting that He knows better than me. That He, in fact, loves me more than I probably love myself. And He loves my kids better than I love my kids, and my wife better than I love my wife. Even when it doesn't make sense. Some of us have planned out our entire life plan, our career path, everything about our lives is perfectly planned out. And then door after door after door is closed. Someone asked me recently this question, what should I do? And I said, let's pray. And they said, okay, now what? And I said, no, I mean let's really pray. And they're like, yeah, but then what are we going to do after that? And I think we have to shift our mindset that prayer is something that we're doing. It is something. It's not just something, it's the most powerful cosmic force in the universe. It is something. But we need to be still in order to be able to do that. When I was moving to Nashville several years ago, I had quit my job. I did the craziest thing. I drove my mother crazy. It was the worst. I'm a terrible son. But I quit my job. I told her I'm going to work as a teacher, a volunteer teacher. I was getting paid like $700 a month. She was so proud of me. She's like, my son had a great job. He quit his job. She even said to me, she goes, you're never going to find a job like this. You're never going to find a woman that will accept you. With, that kind of, it's going to ruin everything about your life. Your service is going to be destroyed and all this stuff. Like, I love my mama. She's the best. And I remind her of this conversation. But, she said, she goes, well, why don't you pray about it? I said, I did. I'll continue. She goes, okay, pray. And then she would call me, fi'e. And I said, like, there's nothing. She goes, طب صلي تاني. And I said, wait, are you asking me to pray until I reach your conclusion? And she goes, لا يعني هو أنا مش شايفة, I don't see that this is what God wants. I said, no, I understand that's not what you want. But like, we have to trust and surrender ourselves, Mama. And I said, my question to you is, are you praying? Are you really praying? And by the way, same conversation happened when I was being called for priesthood. Mama said, absolutely, I have no peace about it. And I let go. I said, God, if this is from you, and I never told her this until after ordination, but I said, God, if this is from you, like, I trust you're going to give my mom peace. I trust. And literally a week before we left, and I struggled because I'm like, I want to honor my mom and my dad, right? I want to honor them. And I said, God, if my parents don't have peace, I don't know how I can do this. And a week before, and I tell you, I didn't tell her this because I didn't want it to be misunderstood or misused. A week before, she called me up and she said, Habibi, you have my blessing. I said, what? What are we talking about? And she said, you have my blessing, go. She said, I began to pray and God gave me peace about it. Right? It's amazing what happens when we allow ourselves to be still in the presence of God. We look onto Him and we see Him, and we stop letting our fears control our lives. Surrender is not a passive thing. It's an active choice to place ourselves and our loved ones into the hands of God. Sometimes we're praying for a specific solution, and God says, I've got something better. Don't be afraid, stand still, and see the salvation of the Lord. It doesn't mean that life is easy and perfect all the time, that there's no challenges. Anyone who's immigrated, Lord knows that anyone living in this world today knows that there's challenges that we face. And placing yourself into the hands of God does not mean that that always goes away. But what it means is that we trust in God's timing and we trust in His ways over our own understanding. When we do that, something truly remarkable happens. The rest of that verse in Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, many of you I'm sure know it. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. Acknowledge Him in all your ways, and He shall direct your path. He will direct your path. Something remarkable happens when we stop letting fear control us. We allow ourselves to get still before God. We look onto Him. We keep trusting in ourselves. We trust in Him. He begins to direct our steps. That's a remarkable thing. When I ask people, like, what's your number one, what do you really want most in life? You know, once we get past like the immature stage of I want a big fat house and a big fat car and a wonderful wife and all that sort of stuff. Like once we get past all of those stages, right? And we've matured a little bit, people oftentimes just say, I just want to walk with the Lord. I want His presence in my life. And what's required from us is actually, it's not easy, but it's quite simple. We got to quit letting fear control us. We need to learn to be still actively. And I know that sounds opposite, but it's actually not. We need to learn to be active in our stillness so that we can look with the eyes of our hearts to see the Lord and to trust Him and let Him direct our paths. When God speaks, we really should learn to trust. I just want to tell you about a few people in Scripture that we can learn from. The Israelites, of course, they stood still and they witnessed the power of God at the Red Sea. Joshua marched around Jericho silently with the children of Israel once a day for 6 days, and then on the seventh day, he did it 7 times. They said, be silent, and then they blew the trumpet, walls came down. Gideon, when he was battling the Midianites, God said, you know what, just stay, just take it easy. I'm going to reduce your army from 32,000 people to 300 men. And God brought victory for Gideon. Hannah, she was unable to conceive for years. And she stood before the Lord with a still heart and said, Lord, my life and any child you give me is yours. and God fulfilled a promise unto her. Saint Mary, when Archangel Gabriel announced that she would conceive the Messiah, she simply said with a still heart, "Let it be to me according to your word." And our Lord Jesus Christ on the cross, as he hung there, he cried out, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." In his stillness, Jesus fulfilled the plan of our salvation. Doesn't mean it's always easy, but it requires us to have a sense of stillness before the Lord. The gospel reminds us that God is with us, that we are to look unto him, that we're not to look onto our problems, but we're to look and see the goodness of God. And I think when we learn to be still from the fears that control us, we can be free from the anxiety of wondering, what's going to happen in my life? Am I good enough for God? And we're going to be free to see the salvation of the Lord that he will accomplish. I want to close up for you that waiting on God is one of the most challenging aspects of faith, especially when everything inside of you wants to move, wants to act, wants to solve the problem yourself. But in those moments, waiting on the Lord allows you to experience God's presence and power in new ways, in profound ways, just as the Israelites did. The effects of trusting God are so much greater than anything that we would gain by taking control into our own hands. And this evening, I want to encourage you to consider areas of your life where God may be asking you to stand still. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's a job. Maybe it's a career path. Maybe it's what to do with your children. Maybe it's God is telling you, be still and quit medicating yourself with sin so that you can actually pause and see the salvation that's right in front of you, that you can see the way that he wants to open up for you. But he's saying, what areas of your life does he want you to be still with? I want to close with a beautiful story about a dad. He had been praying for his son for many years. His son had walked away from the faith, and he was living a life really of spiritual idolatry in the world. He had consumed himself with the idols of the world, with the sins of the world. And the dad tried everything he could with his son. He tried discussions, conversations, interventions. He even turned Teta loose on his son, knowing that Teta was his most favorite person in the world. He would send YouTube videos and verses and apologetics books. He tried everything with this son, and nothing worked. And eventually, he felt God telling him, quit striving. Trust in me. Quit being fearful. Be still and look onto me. And this was tough for the dad. But the dad began to pray. He quit working on his own, and he began working on his knees. He began working in liturgy. He began laboring before the throne of God. He began pouring himself out before the creator of his son and of himself. As he chose to be still, he continued to pray. And years passed and nothing happened, as far as the dad could see. But then, in a completely unexpected way, in a way that the dad could have never arranged or orchestrated or thought of himself, the son found his way back. And he came back with such a deep passion and love for the Lord. And when he came back, he actually began to serve other people and draw other people onto the Lord. And I think when we stand still and we trust God, he can work in ways that surpass our expectations. But the ultimate reward of waiting on God, and I want to make sure that this is clear, it's not that the son came back. The ultimate reward is not that we get what we've been praying for. The ultimate reward for the dad and for us, if we are willing to put our fears aside, stand still and look unto the Lord, is that we will have a deeper, abiding life of communion with God. And maybe, just maybe, that was the little piece that touched the son's heart and brought him back to Christ. I pray that we would learn from our mother, St. Mary, who saw her own son suffering and saw him do many things. And she carried all those things with a heart of stillness in her own heart. That we too would be still before the Lord, put our fears aside, look unto him, and see the work of salvation that he wants to accomplish for us today. All glory be to his name forever. Amen.